Nebraska's first stop on the road to Omaha is set. Find out where coming up.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey folks, thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Like to thank you guys for being here on a Memorial Day. Sorry we're a little late today, but we figured we'd wait to get the news, Mitch, as we
absolutely
start things off today.
Absolutely. Hope everyone's enjoying the holiday. It is noon where we are as we tape this thing, and we just watched on ESPN2 as the 64-team NCAA baseball tournament field was revealed. And we're going to spend this entire episode talking about college baseball, kind of a first for us, but I think it's worthy after the weekend, Connor, that Nebraska had in Omaha, winning 5 consecutive games and topping that off with a Big Ten tournament championship against Penn State on Sunday in front of 13,000 people in a game that started at like 6 a.m., I believe is the time that the Big Ten chose.
For good reason, right? You know, there was so much weather yesterday. So
it was like 76 degrees and sunny with like 7-mile-an-hour winds all afternoon. So I can understand what was going on, you know. So we'll get to that more in the second segment. But here at the beginning, if you haven't heard, Nebraska's headed to Oklahoma State, the Stillwater NCAA regional. The Huskers are a number 2 seed out of 4 teams in that 4-team regional. We'll play Florida. So that's kind of daunting as a name to get the Gators. And of course you have Jack Caglione, who is the two-way star, future first-round pick, soon to be first-round pick out of Florida, who pitches and hits many home runs and over 400. And we saw him in Omaha, last year? The Gators were here a year ago. Yes. So he's a name, but it's a beatable Florida team. The Gators are 28-27. Nebraska has 39 wins after the Big Ten tournament run. Oklahoma State is the 11th seed overall after winning the Big 12 tournament championship, and the Cowboys will host Niagara in the first game. So a familiar venue for at least for like Will Bolt and Rob Childress and the people who have been around Nebraska baseball historically, somewhere that Nebraska fans can get to. And you kind of also avoided just like the gauntlet of being in one of those SEC venues like Arkansas or Tennessee that will be so difficult to get out of. Not that Stillwater, Oklahoma is an easy place to win.
No, I think that's the main takeaway though. You're right. Like, you know, you didn't want to go to Arkansas. You didn't want to go to Texas A&M. You know, those are really good. Not Tennessee. Those are not like bulletproof teams. It's you know, anything's possible. Nebraska pushed Arkansas to the brink a few years ago. But it just gets harder and harder the deeper you kind of go into that conference. They had 11 teams that made the field this year, which was a record. So you know, like you said, not that it gets any easier with Oklahoma State. It's a really good team. There's some, general kind of familiarity there, kind of a regional thing to it. And then Florida is your first game. Like you said, it poses a daunting name, but I don't know. I'll be curious to see. Obviously Nebraska, you know, has the pitcher on the first game of a regional to be able to feel like they could compete with anybody in Brett Sears. So that's who they're going to throw out there, I would imagine, in the first game on Friday against a SEC opponent. And then you have a number 2 who I think they can match up with anybody as well. So, it's never easy, but as far as the draw, you know, it on the scale of how difficult it could have been for Nebraska, it's really not. It's not so daunting that you feel like, man, season's over. There's a window of opportunity there, I think.
It's such a fitting, I think, finish at Nebraska too. Well, of course, he hopes to be pitching, making a few more starts, but the beginning of the end for Brett Sears at Nebraska here in the first game of a regional, I think it's really fitting because of the season that he's had to put himself on the scene nationally. He should be an All-American candidate. So right out of the gate in a regional opener, it's like, all right, hey, go do this against Florida. This is one of the premier programs in the country. It hasn't been a vintage season by any means for Florida, but if you can beat Florida, then you're at the top in the top echelon of college baseball as a starting pitcher. That's just how it is. Now, quickly on the Gators, and this is an interesting scenario out of the SEC this year because there were 5 teams in the conference that are in the top 8 nationally. And then there are 5 teams. And then there's Mississippi State that's kind of in the middle and didn't get to host. And then there are 5 teams that finished 13 and 17 in the league. And that's, the defending national champ, LSU, and Alabama out of the West. And then Vanderbilt, another national power, South Carolina, multiple national championships in recent years, and Florida, national championship in a recent year. So all 5 finished 13 and 17, and all 5 get into the NCAA tournament field. So 11 teams from the SEC, 5 hosts. The conference just continues to be an absolute beast on the national level, and you see it in Omaha because so many of these teams advance to the College World Series, and I think it's fitting for Brett Sears and for Nebraska to say, if you want to start this thing off right, like you have all year in the Big Ten, now the competition level goes up a few notches, and you're going to get one of these SEC powers.
Yeah, you mentioned Jack Caglione. Got a chance to see him up close last year at the College World Series. So he's been their basically Saturday starter this year. He's a 2-way player. He's more notably, I think, their 3-hole hitter who hits 475-foot home runs. Maybe you've seen the clips this year of him hitting balls to outer space. He's a giant human being. He wears size 16 shoes, and he's left-handed. He throws, so they won't be afraid to use him kind of in spot situations as well when they need to do that. He's as daunting of a figure as there is in the NCAA in general, in college baseball in general, and Nebraska gets him in the first game. But outside of that, it's been an up and down year for them this year, which is kind of interesting. And then you look ahead at, you don't want to get too far ahead in these things, but you always want to peek a little bit. That Stillwater regional is matched up with the winner of the Clemson regional, which is Clemson, Vanderbilt, Coastal Carolina, and High Point. So all those teams, coming out of kind of the southeast portion of the country there. Clemson last year, I believe, had Tennessee in their regional and didn't make it out. Vanderbilt's a tough draw for them too. So I don't know, like you could always dream when you get into scenarios like this, but one out of those 8 teams that we just mentioned is going to be going to the College World Series in Omaha. So that's how you have to approach it. And Nebraska, if you put it like Mitch, let's just say if you did it this way: Clemson, Vanderbilt, Coastal Carolina, High Point, Oklahoma State, Nebraska, Florida, Niagara. Who would you say has, what are the odds lists for the team out of that to represent that region in Omaha, that portion of the schedule in Omaha?
Well, I think you got to say that Clemson is the favorite because it would be at home for as long as it wins and is the number 6 national seed. But also, it's not like the team that jumps off the page and just scares you and says, "Oh no, that's the worst case scenario to face Clemson." I think that's your reaction. Like if you're a fan of these other teams. Now, if you're a coach and you've done the scout on Clemson, perhaps your answer is different, and you might have an argument that like they're the worst team you could face. I don't know enough about Clemson at this point, having just seen the bracket to have a great understanding. But they're the favorite just because of the home field. And then after that, like you have to look at programs like Vanderbilt and Florida because they have the history and they've seen the SEC, and like they're not going to go against better competition no matter what happens here or even in Omaha than what they faced week in and week out in league play. So it's been a difficult year for Vanderbilt. It's been a difficult year for Florida, but both LSU, same kind of situation, not in this 8-team grouping, but all of those teams get to breathe a sigh of relief now and say, we made it through. We had four games under 500 in SEC play. Now you can relax. Now you can breathe a sigh of relief and just go out and do what you're accustomed to doing as a program in the postseason. And that's a scary thought for all of those teams, including Oklahoma State.
You get a fresh start. Everybody gets to, you get to throw your pitching however you want to throw your pitching. Like Nebraska got through the Big Ten. We'll talk about the Big Ten tournament this week, but they got through that thing and they needed some Herculean efforts for some guys. Now you get to take a breath and reset, and it feels a little bit like you're breathing clear air. And You're playing with a little house money, right? You're in the NCAA tournament. Why not?
I looked at a couple of Florida's weekend pitching plans, and I'm glad you pointed that out, that Caglione has been the guy on Saturday, because they've just gone through different arms on Fridays, it appears. So, and that's part of the reason when you see a program like this that's 28 and 27, you're like, well, what happened? Oh, how did that even Florida in theory should never be 28 and 27 as a baseball program, but baseball's a weird sport and things happen. And it part of it's that they haven't had consistency on Friday nights. So I'm sure if you're Nebraska, you are going,
Nebraska.
yeah, right. It's the opposite. You're going, okay, what are they going to do? Like, that's the number one question on your mind right now. If you're Nebraska, is are they going to throw Caglione on Friday night? It's not been their MO to go through the regular season like that, but it's different in the postseason. And if you're Florida, are you holding him for a potential game against Oklahoma State? Are you going, hey, we're the underdog, we're the 3 seed against the 2 seed Nebraska in this game, so we got to go with our absolute best? I don't know, necessarily what their reasoning has been for going with him as their 2 instead of their 1, or what their thinking will be going into this regional. But it wouldn't be shocking, I say, to see a Sears Caglione matchup on Friday in Stillwater.
Hey, just quickly here, we'll spend a minute on this before we get to last week. We had this on the sheet. How close did Nebraska get to hosting? It didn't, it felt like even if they were, and they did run all the way through to win the Big Ten championship last week in Omaha, it felt like it was out of reach ever since that midweek loss to South Dakota State. And potentially, if you want to look at it that way, you were one embarrassing loss away from it.
I think so.
There's some regret that goes along with that.
I think so. I think if I've been 40 wins and you wouldn't have had that 10, I believe it was 10 spots that they dropped in the RPI because of that loss. You might have dropped 1 or 2 spots by beating South Dakota State, but I think that's what did it. That's how close Will Bolt's program was to getting a host. And, maybe UC Santa Barbara or, Oregon State. Not Oregon State, but who was the 15? Looking at the bracket now, Santa Barbara was the 14. Arizona was the 13. Oregon State was the 15. So maybe one of those schools doesn't get in as a host. East Carolina, the 16, and instead that's Nebraska. But win the games in the midweek is the lesson to be learned out of that. All right, we're going to come back after the break and talk about that run through the Big Ten tournament at Charles Schwab Field for Nebraska and just what happened that got Nebraska to a place where I don't think a lot of people expected them to be after the opening round loss against Ohio State way back on Tuesday. So that's next. Stick with us at Locked On Nebraska.
All right, it's Happer here for eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and you're not burning cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP. Keep your ride or die alive. ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, welcome back. It had only happened once since 1995, where a team lost in the first game of the Big Ten tournament and came back to win it. That was in 1995 when it was a 4-team tournament. And Ohio State did it. We talked about it last week. I think we mentioned on this show, Mitch, how Nebraska is not a team that's very well positioned to lose their first game in a tournament like this. But they came back and threw Brett Sears and Mason McConaughey, and they got back to the 2 wins, and then had to take down Indiana twice in a day. Did that and beat Ohio State in a nail biter in the final, and ripped off 5 in a row and proved us all wrong. Nebraska baseball won the Big Ten championship in front of I don't know, what was it, 15,000 on Sunday morning?
Yeah,
And
just short of that. I think the announced attendance was 13,300 for the 10 a.m. game. Yeah,
it was quite
game
the
was moved
spectacle, man.
to was moved from its 2 p.m. slot. You know, this is part of what I think just continues to frustrate people in the public about the Big Ten and when it comes to baseball. And I spent some time down at the Schwab last week and talked with various coaches and wrote a piece that came out Saturday on The Athletic about what the league needs to do to raise its profile and just continue to. You've got these schools, these athletic departments that are as rich and powerful as any in the country. And we talked quite a bit about the SEC in the last segment. And the Big Ten is not going to be the SEC in baseball with 5 national seeds and 11 programs, including 4 that finished under 500 in the tournament. But the Big Ten, by the skin of its teeth, got 3 teams in the field today. Indiana made it in, and I'm somewhat surprised by that. But we can talk about that toward the end of the show. The bottom line is here, Big Ten coaches want they want the investment from the league. They want the commitment. They believe that the talent level is improving. They're excited about the 4 West Coast teams coming in. They're excited about Tony Petitti, their commissioner, who has a background in Major League Baseball, and they feel that he has their back and supports their efforts. And then they go and take the league championship game and put it at 10 in the morning when maybe there was going to be like a passing shower in the afternoon. Like, this is a beautiful, pristine field that drains in minutes. They had a flooded moat in the dugout on Tuesday and still played that day. But the threat of like a rain shower in the afternoon forced them to probably cut their attendance in half. If you don't live in Omaha, if you live maybe out in the western part of the state, Lincoln or beyond, you probably don't come to that game when you might have been coming for a 2 p.m. First pitch, because you don't want to get up at 6 in the morning and when you can just watch it on TV. So like the Big Ten is like shooting itself in the foot again and again, even as its coaches in the same stadium where this is happening are like screaming about how the sport deserves more respect nationally than what it's getting. So soapbox over on that one.
No, it's absolutely wild. I mean, what worst case scenario, you play it, at 5 o'clock or at 7 o'clock.
Mm-hmm. I know. Prime time would be rough. Yeah,
I know. Geez, so let's go to 10 a.m. instead. Anyway, I saw some conspiracy theorists, some Husker fan conspiracy theorists jump in my mentions yesterday. It was like, no, it was never about the weather. It was about like crowd control and like at the building that hosts the College World Series, they were worried about the 50. Okay, so that's
there would be too many people there. Yeah,
I got in too many Twitter arguments yesterday, but anyway, what Nebraska did at the Big Ten baseball tournament was frankly incredible. From losing 15-2 in the conversations we were having about them after Tuesday night,
like just go home. Don't even bother with next week.
Yeah, and like how they're on the edge of the NCAA tournament. Hey, don't lose, to Purdue or else it might be tricky out there. They not only get that win, and then they come back and beat Ohio State. And then, I think really what you have to do is highlight what Will Walsh did on Saturday morning against Indiana, throwing a complete game and beating them 4-2 and then pushing them to that second game. And then what Jackson Brockett did in the championship game on Sunday. In order to make it through a tournament like that, you're going to have to get from innings from guys that you didn't expect to get innings from, and then just squeeze everything out of them. In the conversations I was having before the tournament, I was like, hey, maybe you can get like 5 out of a guy like that. Well, they got 9 from Walsh and 8 from Brockett, which is just unbelievable. And that's how they did it.
I don't know if they got a visit before Wednesday or during the off day Wednesday from like Will Bolt's team in 1999 that Rob Childress served as the pitching coach for. But it was like I was in your maybe. Do you remember? Are you too young to remember? You remember?
I don't remember
their
99. I remember when they were in the series. Yeah.
99, 2000, 01. Those were magical times at the conference tournament for Nebraska, and they were teams that Will Bolt played on. He was a senior in 01 on the team, the first CWS team for Nebraska, caught the ball at Buck Belzer Field to send the Huskers to Omaha against Rice. And those teams, they got these incredible pitching performances, just like what we saw in downtown Omaha, but they were happening in Oklahoma City, and it was guys like Chad Wiles and RD Spees who, like, what? How did he throw a complete game? Like, and that's what you're saying about Will Walsh, and then Brockett, who'd already pitched in the tournament, coming back on Sunday and throwing 8 innings. And then I think some of your Twitter conversations, Connor, may have. Well, first of all, let's just mention Josh Caron. We should have started the show with Josh Caron.
6 home runs.
6 home runs at the Big Ten baseball tournament sets a tournament record. It's like Nebraska also got that from Dan Johnson, got 5 home runs in one tournament. Another Will Bolt's old teammates, played in the major leagues, was a great college slugger. And here Caron is outdoing him in Omaha.
How about Gabe Swanson too? I mean,
Swanson was clutch,
hit in the championship game, and was knocking out home runs earlier in the week as well. Like, just great performances from a few select guys.
And then to bring Sears back, like I was saying all weekend that they wouldn't do it. I was of the opinion, like, don't risk it. Like, I think my opinion differs from you a little bit here, and I'm okay with how it turned out. Him throwing like 15 pitches or less, it's fine. It's great how it turned out. You brought him back, and he got to have that awesome moment. But I was thinking, like, don't take that risk. Like, win the game and just leave him, let him stay in his routine, because the most important start of his career is coming up on Friday, and he's going to be facing a good opponent in a 2-3 game, and just don't get him out of his rhythm. I know he throws a bullpen, but a bullpen on a Tuesday afternoon is different than coming in to close a Big Ten tournament championship. Your blood gets flowing, and it's just different. I'm guessing his arm is probably a little more feeling it a little more today, even after 13 pitches, than it would have been if he threw his normal side session in the bullpen on a Tuesday during the week. But hey, it turned out fine. It shows you what that meant to Nebraska, and that they're a team. They're not a collection of individuals. So good for them for having to trust in him, and good for Brett Sears to get to have that moment. He deserves it after the season that he's had.
We had mentioned this before, Mitch, but I mean, they had never dogpiled on that field before. I mean, I really think there's something to that. I think there's something to winning there. It has not been a play. I mean, we talked about it on a podcast last week after they lost that 15-2 game. Like, it just smells like a team a little bit that, they play there a lot, and they've lost there a lot, and it's kind of like second nature to them playing there. And so it was really great to see them, come up with big clutch performances this weekend with giant crowds and guys, pumping their fists and screaming and all that stuff. Like that was a very different thing than what we usually get from that team at that ballpark. And then you get the dog pile at the end, which was great. So I think they took it really seriously, and that was an important thing to them to win it.
We'll come back and continue this conversation, and also talk some about the Big Ten in general and the tournament field to close the show. But first, if you're watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day, then you know that you've got to turn down the volume with all the shouting. So make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Okay, final few minutes here on this Memorial Day edition of Locked On Nebraska. Thanks for joining us. Please watch us on YouTube if you're listening today. Please listen to us if you're watching today. You can find us and download our show on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Amazon Music. We continue the conversation about Nebraska baseball at the Big Ten tournament. And the last thing that I wanted to say about this, and kind of playing off of what we were discussing before the break, and Brett Sears getting in to pitch the 9th inning against Penn State on Sunday, is the importance of winning a conference tournament. And I don't think that's in any way lost on Will Bolt and his coaching staff because of their history at Nebraska. And really, when the greatest period of Nebraska baseball began, they kicked it off, they kick-started it. They built the momentum by having success in conference tournaments. That's what Nebraska baseball did in 99, 2000, 2001, and all the way through the end of their run under Dave Van Horn and then Mike Anderson with Rob Childress along the way for the whole thing. They did it in Oklahoma City and in Arlington, Texas, by having great success at the conference tournament, and it turned into momentum that Nebraska was then able to take into the NCAA postseason by winning regionals and going on the road for, first a super regional at Stanford and then having a couple of super regionals, 3 of them in 5 years at home. So I'm sure there's a ton of belief in that clubhouse, right now, as they get ready for this postseason at Haymarket Park. To repeat that and to try to recreate that feeling, and they feel like they've done some of that by having great success at the conference tourney.
There's nothing like it. It's going on the road, even though it's not on the road technically for Nebraska, but they're staying in Omaha. They're in the hotel, just being out there, and it's a team that kind of that likes to pride itself on being grinders and stuff like that. Well, it's really, really hard to win, to play 6 games, win 5 of them in 6 days, which is what Nebraska did. So that could be a real bonding deal. And we always knew that Nebraska team was going to have to be greater than kind of the sum of its parts. And it has a little bit of that vibe. So I don't know. It's a lot of this is who gets hot at what time. And Nebraska has a little bit of that juice to them right now. So, and winning a conference tournament is the best thing you could do for that. It just gives you so much swag, so much confidence that they'll take into Stillwater this week.
It does, and I'm sure the players too just got so much juice and energy from Sears, from who's been the guy, to see him, whatever. He's not sacrificing anything. I get it. He's a team guy. He's a senior. But to come out of his routine and he's not a closer. Like, he hasn't been a closer this year. It's a different
it wasn't automatic
kind of mentality.
Yeah.
So you really got to take something from that, and then they can feed off of that and feel really good about what they take into Stillwater. Let's discuss quick what the committee did with the rest of the Big Ten. I think you can say that they gave Nebraska a reward for winning the Big Ten tournament, and they didn't send them to Arkansas. They didn't send them to Texas A&M. They didn't even send them to Oklahoma, which is the number 9 seed in the tournament. They gave them Oklahoma State, the 11 seed, basically about the lowest top seed that Nebraska could have reasonably found itself matched up against in a regional. Now, on the other side of the coin, Illinois, the Big Ten regular season champ, did get in the tournament after going 1-2 in the conference tourney, but the Illini are going to be playing Indiana State, which was a borderline host going into the weekend. Really, I think a lot of people saw them as a host. And they're doing it in Lexington, Kentucky, at the site of the number 2 national seed, Kentucky Wildcats. And the Indiana Hoosiers made it into the tournament after making some noise with a 2-0 start at the conference tourney. And they're a good team. And they've got Devin Taylor, who's one of the best players in the country. So that's good for NCAA baseball. But the Hoosiers are going to Knoxville, Tennessee, and they're going to play Southern Miss and then play either Tennessee or Northern Kentucky. So 1 and 2 are the sites delivered to Big Ten teams not named Nebraska.
Yeah. There was a lot of conversation on the BTN broadcast during the championship game about how the conference is getting better and this and that. And they were talking about NCAA caliber of teams. I don't know. I don't know how much better. Obviously, Indiana getting into the NCAA tournament a whole bunch, and then going to the College World Series, a few years ago, that obviously helps the profile of the conference. But I mean, the only way to do this and the only way to get up the cred of your conference is to continue to have success in the postseason. And so, I don't see Indiana making it out of Knoxville. I don't see Illinois making it out of Lexington.
Really, you don't? Okay.
And so Nebraska's going to have to be the poster child for that this year. Does it mean anything for the conference directly as far as how it's treated going forward? No, but it sits in the back of your mind. It's a Big Ten school, and that would. I wonder if that would be the storyline, because we haven't seen that since Nebraska's been in the Big Ten. Nebraska makes a super regional. Would it be because Nebraska wasn't really treated like a northern school when they were winning so much, which
True.
is you know, because it
Big
was
12. It's Big
it was
12.
south
Yeah.
facing. Yeah. So I wonder how that would sort of be handled if Nebraska were to make it through this weekend.
I think Nebraska's got like kind of a hybrid personality when it comes
Yeah.
to the way people view things nationally. Like they're not grouped entirely with the rest of the Big Ten because Nebraska gets good attendance and has more history than a lot of the most of the schools. So yeah, I don't think it would be the same as if like Minnesota made it to a
Right.
super regional. Yeah, I will say with the Big Ten in regard to the Big Ten, I think it's deeper. It isn't necessarily like full of the top end talent, but I think it's a deeper league in that like you can go 6-7 teams deep. You saw the 8 seed Penn State make a nice run and make it all the way to the last inning of the championship with a chance to get to a regional. That's where I think the Big Ten has improved in just like its depth of quality, but still doesn't have, you know, the teams that are just a force out there on the national stage and won't automatically because you have Oregon, Washington, USC, and UCLA coming in. UCLA and Washington would have been two of the worst teams in the Big Ten this year, amazingly.
All right, Mitch. We'll wrap it up for today. We'll have plenty of baseball talk this week as the Huskers get ready for the regional against Florida. But we'll return to kind of regularly scheduled programming tomorrow morning. Thanks for watching and thanks for listening. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and it's available now on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app.